Toula's Tips for Caregivers. Help is on the air with Toula Wooten, your source to go for resources and information to help you in this rewarding but sometimes challenging role. Toula's Tips for Caregivers is brought to you by Agewell Institute at Baptist Health, by Elmcroft Assisted Living and Memory Care. Now here's Toula.
Well, greetings, everyone, and welcome to Toula's Tips for Caregivers. I'm really happy to be back with you again today. For those of you who are my followers, you know that I've been doing this radio show, Toula's Tips for Caregivers, for about 8 years now, trying to reach caregivers of our frail elders and our nation to help caregivers, support them, give them encouragement, and connect them to resources that will help them in this sometimes very challenging role. We know that there are over 44 million caregivers in the United States. 70% of us, and I say us because I am still one, work full-time and go home and care for an aging relative. Studies also show that about 49% of caregivers use up all or most of their savings in caring for their loved one. That's what we're going to talk about today, a little bit of preservation of assets. Hope that gets your attention. It usually does. My guest today is Magdalein. Kim is a long-term care specialist serving the retirement community with long-term care insurance and financial insurance recovery related to nursing home care expenses. We all know that nursing home placement is an exorbitantly high cost, and there are only a couple of ways to pay for nursing home care. So, Kim, let's talk today a little bit about that. Thank you for being on my show.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Toula. I'm glad you invited me.
Glad to have you. This is such an important topic. Obviously, our finances and preservation of what we have while taking care of a loved one is crucial to us. We're going to talk about nursing home placement a lot today, and again, the methods of paying for that. But let's start off with talking about Medicaid planning. What is that, and how do you do it?
Medicaid planning. We start with what is Medicaid. Medicaid is one of the entitlement programs that was created by the federal government to take care of people who are basically indigent. They have no means of taking care of themselves financially. That's typical. It's either for disabled people at a younger age or infirmed at an older age, past 65. Medicaid will step in and pay for a nursing home bill if there are no assets or income to pay for it privately. They'll take care of that. So Medicaid planning is basically done primarily exclusively by attorneys. They're the ones who put together the plans. I'm not an attorney, actually. But they're the ones who put together the plan or the plan of action, so to speak. They implement the plan of action. They create and prepare documents as well as how to go about getting it done. And typically, many of the attorneys will go ahead and actually apply for the funds from Medicaid for the client in the process. So what I do is I marry everything together when I'm talking to clients. I'll if I have an attorney, I have 3 attorneys that I refer to, and they actually do all the planning, but they don't actually do the application process. So I also have an application processor who's very good at what they do. They've done 7,000 of them, so they know how to get the application through the system. And when it's done correctly, the idea is to save money. Those people who have assets that would normally disqualify them for Medicaid can qualify for Medicaid when an attorney is hired to step in and get that qualification created.
Right, and it is the attorney. They have the elder law attorneys in particular who have the expertise and knowing how to preserve those assets, whether it be a qualified income trust or something like that to preserve the assets. So you tell me that you work with an attorney. You actually do the application process, or do you have them determine eligibility first and then you do the application? How does that work?
Well, actually, the attorney does the heavy lifting. They're the ones who are going to determine if it can be done. They determine the assets of the client, the income of the client. They create whatever documents are necessary to move those assets to what's called a non-countable asset or non-countable income, and they create the legal documents to accomplish that. And once they've done that, then either the attorney himself or herself, within the confines of their own practice, they can go ahead and actually apply to Medicaid for the benefits, or you can have a processor who can do the same thing. My 3 attorneys use a processor to do that. They don't have in-house people do it, but it's actually just the complicated process of applying to Medicaid, and it's easy to get that wrong. So you do want to have someone who can do that for you to make sure it's right, because every day counts. Every day that you're paying for a nursing home, it's a couple of $100 or $300 a day. So it's important to get the plan done, completed, and done in a timely manner.
How long does it usually take to complete a plan? Let's say once the attorney has given the processor all the information, how quickly can they turn that around and actually get the Medicaid plan applied for, the Medicaid applied for?
I've seen it done in less than a month, but that's sort of rare. I've seen it take a lot longer than that, but it really depends on the attorney and how busy the attorney is and how good they are at what they do, all kinds of different things. It depends on the plan itself and how complex the plan may be. Mm-hmm. I'm in favor of allowing them to complete a plan that's less complicated, so to speak, that moves quickly and can be done quickly. I like to see an average of about 60 days to completion, but I have seen it happen much faster than that. Which means that once it takes place and Medicaid starts paying, then of course the client has saved all of that. Every day, like I said, every day counts. So
every day counts. As fast as possible is great. I know that while if you've placed your loved one in a nursing home and say you're private paying while the Medicaid application is being processed, once it is approved, it can be retroactive back to day of admission. And a lot of my listeners don't know that. I think that's an important point to make.
It is, yes. I mean, let's say the application date is April 1st. And it takes, once the Medicaid has received the application, it goes through their processes. Busyness is an issue. How busy is the application processor? Are there any documents missing? Do they feel like some of the questions weren't answered correctly? They send it back to you, start all over again. So you don't want to make any mistakes on that.
Right.
They just simply reject it. They don't ask you. They don't say, "Here, fix this," and send it back. They just reject it and send it back to you. You figure it out, or the attorney has to figure it out. So, like I say, the faster that takes place, then what happens is, let's say it is complete by maybe May 30th. Mm-hmm. Then it goes back retroactive to April 1st when the application was submitted, and they will pay those. They will refund that money that's been paid for that period of time.
Which is huge. So you got the attorney, very huge. We all know the cost of nursing homes, and in our area, they average $80,000 to $100,000 a year. That's just in the North Florida area. Nationwide, it varies, but they can certainly go higher than that in a lot of states.
Absolutely.
And, frankly, who has that kind of money to pay $100,000 a year for the care of their loved one in a nursing home? So you've got the attorney creating the initial plan and then the processor really taking it from there. What does it cost to get this done?
That can be all over the board as well. One of the things that you want to be is frugal with the attorney. You don't want an attorney to charge exorbitant fees when it's simply not necessary. I've seen fees anywhere from around $5,000 to $15,000. Some of it is the complexity of the process.
Right.
Some of it is the attorney themselves. So, I try to, since I'm talking to my clients about it, that's one of the reasons why I have vetted literally dozens and dozens of attorneys, and I boiled it down to just a few in Florida that I refer to because their processes are simpler. Their work is simpler, therefore they don't have to charge as many hours for their work. And then of course it's turned over to the application processor, and their cost is lower than the typical situation because they process so quickly. Their costs are a little bit higher for the application process, but speed fixes that.
Speed is of the essence.
As we said, yep. Now I have to say again, one of the things that we have to be careful of here is, since this is listened to by across state lines.
Right.
Every state is different. We have the federal rules, which are guidelines, and then we have each state that has their own guidelines as well. They can go strictly by the federal rules, or they can modify those rules depending on their own budgets. Because the federal government puts money in, the state puts money in, so they both have a say-so in how these plans work. There are about 30-some states that do it almost exactly the same way, and then there are about 20 other states that are all different, little different nuances. So it's extremely important to make sure that the attorney is very well schooled on the nuances of the state where you're applying.
And I know that Medicare requirements for eligibility even vary some from state to state. So it is, like you just said, it is very important that you find an attorney who is skilled and is an expert on Medicaid eligibility for that state. So you gave me an approximate cost or range for the attorneys. Once they turn it over to a processor, what additional costs do they incur then? Typically, the processor can either charge a flat fee, or they will charge a percentage of the assets. And typically, they're going to have a cap on that. So if they charge like 2% or 3% of the assets as their fee, they're going to cap out at a certain number. So, it really depends on the plan, and like I say, the complexity of the plan. They don't want to overcharge, but they don't want to undercharge either, because when you're dealing with Medicaid, and this is not a slam on government, but these folks are very busy, and it's not difficult. I mean, it is difficult from time to time to actually to speak to someone once you have sent an application in. Yep. So you may make a call and you'll get voicemail a lot. Yeah. And then you get a call back, and then of course the attorney might be busy when the callback comes in. Then then they message here, it's back and forth and back and forth. So just one phone call could literally take days to complete. And when you've got an attorney who's charging by the hour, then some of that can cause a problem. So that's why it's good to have a Medicaid application processor, because you don't charge clerics $250 an hour to do what they do. Right. They do it at $20 an hour. So it's not necessary to have the attorney involved in that process unless you don't have an option. Gotcha. And in some states you don't have an option. Yeah. So is it legal?
I'm in touch with attorneys all over the country. I have several associations that are elder law associations, and I know attorneys in practically every state. So if you have people who call in or correspond with you, say, what about Missouri or what about Oklahoma? Do you know anybody here? We can find folks for them there if they would like to, if they need to inquire about that.
And that's an important point to make. Listeners, please do know that this is, obviously going to be on the web, so it's international, not just national. But if you are living in another state and you want to talk to Kim Magdalein about this, I will put him in touch with you. But Kim, while we're talking about that, why don't you go ahead and give me an email address or the best way to reach you?
Best way to reach me is at Kim, K-I-M, like a girl's name, at don'tloseitall.com. That's, there's no apostrophe in don't. Mm-hmm.
Okay, Kim at don'tloseitall.com. I like the website. Don't lose it all.
Right.
So is this process legal, Kim?
Well, yes, it is, and there's some wrangling about that. In fact, we had something that came up about 3 years ago where one of the Medicaid application processors, at the state level, was uncomfortable with the process and verbally, was vocal about it with one of the legal processing firms. And of course, everything went through fine. But about 2 years later, this same Medicaid employee called the Medicaid processing firm and said, my mom's in a nursing home and she's using up her $200,000. What can we do to stop that? So this was someone who fussed about the process when it didn't pertain to her, but when it did pertain to her, she changed her mind about it. But the process is absolutely legal. That's why attorneys do it. It is illegal for someone who is not an attorney to do it, but it's not illegal for an attorney to do it. And and as far as the processing is concerned, our Medicaid processor has actually processed over 7,000 applications in the state of Florida. So here's whether you know it's legal or not. Does Medicaid accept it? And that's the issue. If Medicaid does not accept it, then of course there's something wrong with it.
Right.
But if Medicaid accepts it, then we know that it's good to do it and it's okay to do it.
If you've got a government body like Medicaid accepting it, it's good to go. So, Ken,
Sure.
How does this really save money? Talk to me about that a little bit.
Well, okay. So obviously the nursing home costs a lot of money. You mentioned other states up in New England. I've heard numbers in the $12,000, $13,000, $14,000 a month.
Yeah.
I've heard some areas where it's only about $4,000 or $5,000 a month. But whenever you're using the word thousands, it's a lot of money.
Yep.
And that can crash through a nest egg pretty rapidly. And even though there are parts to this that leave a spouse a certain amount of money, and in a lot of ways it's really not enough because the Medicaid is going to take the person who's a resident. Medicaid is going to take their income. If it's Social Security or pension, they're going to take a majority of their income and leave some to the spouse, but only a portion of that. So the spouse has now lost an income at home, and they're only allowed also to keep about $120,000. And what happens to that spouse once the resident expires? Well, they're going to need funds to continue their own lives. So it's important to get this done and not spend everything so that the spouse doesn't have anything. And a lot of folks have really done a great job through the years of doing without and being frugal and not spending their money and saving for retirement, and they want to leave some money to their kids and grandkids. And this is also a way to accomplish that without burning the entire retirement income or retirement nest egg out.
Yeah, that's important. Who wants to do that, on their long-term care?
No, that's right.
What can I do to avoid a crisis plan like you described a minute ago?
Well, okay. So a crisis plan is when you're about to go in a nursing home. It's inevitable. You're taking care of somebody. It really is not working anymore. It's either too expensive for the caregiver, or it's just too much stress, or they're becoming sick themselves and they can't do it. There are probably, dozens of reasons why it's necessary for someone to go in a nursing home, not the least of which it's best for their own personal care.
Right.
So when that happens and we do a Medicaid plan, or an attorney does a Medicaid plan at that point, that's called a crisis plan, because we have now passed all of the alternatives and now we're at crisis and we have to stop the bleeding somehow. Well, prior to that, though, there's a way to keep it from happening, and that is to make sure that you're prepared for long-term care expenses in advance. You can do that by multiplying money. Some people like to do it with long-term care policies. The only problem is that traditional long-term care policies are expensive. They can also go up in the premiums on a class basis, state by state. They can actually price a client out so that they can't afford to pay the premiums anymore. Sometimes it's hard to get because someone is already infirmed, or they've got too many physical or mental issues that they can't qualify for traditional long-term care insurance. Well, there are actually alternatives. One of them is called asset-based long-term care. Another one is called an asset-based annuity. Excuse me, a long-term care annuity. What they are really doing is you're utilizing $1 to buy $5 or $7 or $10, depending on how you structure it. So you can take $50,000 and make it $350,000, so to speak, for long-term care purposes, without actually committing the $50,000 and without losing the $50,000 if nothing goes wrong. So it's sort of like setting money aside in a rainy day account, and if nursing home does take place, or assisted living, or home health care, then you've multiplied those dollars because the event has now taken place. But here's a caveat: you have to do it in advance of a crisis plan, because you have to do it when people are healthy enough to be able to qualify for it.
Right. It pays off to do it when you're still healthy.
Sure. And the earlier the better. I mean, there are caregivers who are listening to this program who are not in their 60s and 70s and 80s. They're in their 50s.
Right.
And if you're listening to this program and you're in your 50s or even your 40s, that's the time to create a long-term care plan. You're not setting aside money that you can't use in retirement. It's setting aside money that may be used for either purpose, but what it does is it really, really lowers the cost immensely by purchasing it at a much younger age, and it's much easier to qualify for if you're not taking pills yet. So, if you're not on medications for practically everything that's going on in your life, and the cabinet's not full of pill bottles, then it's a whole lot easier to qualify for long-term care insurance, and it's far, far, far less expensive.
So the earlier you do it, the better chances you will have of being healthy, and so therefore the earlier, the healthier, the lower the cost. So many people don't realize that. So many people in our nation do not plan for that part of their lives. The recent study that I read says that 60% of Americans think they're not going to need any kind of long-term care system support, nothing. They're just maybe going to die in their sleep someday or something, when in fact 70% of us will develop some sort of chronic illness that's going to require some type of long-term care support, be it assisted living, nursing home, round-the-clock care in the home. Most of us are going to need some kind of care like that, and most of us in our nation don't prepare for it.
That's right. I go to a nursing home every week. It's a part of ministry. And in fact, I go every Tuesday at 10. I was there today. And every one of those people, I promise you, every one of them would have said, this wouldn't happen to me.
Right.
And there's a lady in there who is she is just an inspiration to me. Her name is Joni. And she is 49 years old, and she's been there since she was 19.
Oh, so young.
Now that's an extreme situation. She was in an automobile accident.
Right.
She cannot communicate well. She communicates by pointing to an alphabet board, and so she can say some words. But what she says to me every time I leave is, "Be sure to wear your seatbelt." That's her life's mission, because she was not wearing a seatbelt, and she has spent the last 29 years in a nursing home. So, it's not just the situations where we get sick, we start losing memory, or, something starts going wrong for a lot of different reasons, but it's also accidents, and an accident can happen at any time. So when you're not prepared for this, I do a seminar called 7 Ways Retirees Crack Their Nest Eggs. And this is one of the 7 ways that they do it. And it's the most devious, the most difficult, and the most expensive thing that happens in retirement that cracks everything that you'd saved for a lifetime, is some type of long-term care episode.
It makes people go into poverty. So many people really truly go into poverty because of these medical crises like that. And those people haven't prepared, and that's why.
You are listening to Toula's Tips for Caregivers. We'll be right back after this sponsor break. Hi, this is Toula, and I'm here to talk to you about Baptist's new Age Well Institute. Are you caring for a loved one who's 65 or older? Are you a boomer like myself who's caring for a parent? And perhaps your parent has been experiencing some decline in their overall health. Let me highly recommend to you the Baptist Age Well Institute. They have the only real geriatrician here in Northeast Florida who is able to look at the whole person. Their comprehensive approach includes a nurse, a doctor, a social worker, a pharmacist, a dietitian. They have their own physical therapy there. They can work with folks with memory disorders. My goal is to help you, the caregiver, find an organization that can care for your loved one who's 65 or older. I take my own parents there, and I highly recommend the Age Well Institute at Baptist. Please give them a call at 904-202-4243. Again, that's 904-202-4243. You'll be so glad you did.
Have you read the new book, Love Stories and Timeless Tips yet? It's by our own Toula Wooten with Toula's Tips for Caregivers. Toula is a caregiver, too, as well as an expert on caregiving. You can get it in paperback or on Kindle at Amazon.com. The book is filled with touching stories of caregivers taking care of their loved ones. Each chapter has helpful ideas that we all can use. I love that Toula included a Toula's tip with each story. Her message to caregivers is clear. Take care of yourself so that you can take care of your loved one. This is a beautiful book for all caregivers to read, whether you're a part-time, full-time, or long-distance caregiver, or someone receiving care. You should get the book today. Just go to Amazon.com. Search for Love Stories and Timeless Tips by Toula Wooten. And now, let's return to Toula's Tips for Caregivers, brought to you in part by Age Well Institute at Baptist Health, by Elmcroft Assisted Living and Memory Care. Once again, here's Toula.
I would like to bring up one thing and please, I hope your audience understands, and I'm not fussing. I just see this every day, and so do you. And that is that people who say, well, I have family who can take care of me. Well, that's a that's a person who has never taken care of somebody.
Right.
Because they don't know what they're asking for.
Right.
They're asking for a caregiver to give up their life. They're asking for a person. If the person who is infirmed, is saying, I'm going to put you in the same prison I'm in.
Right.
I'm going to limit your life the way my life is limited. You're going to be as infirmed as I am. And, if I'm the person who's sick, now this is from my viewpoint, but if I'm a person who's sick and needs care, I certainly don't want a loved one, my wife or somebody else, to have to stop her life because I had to stop mine or slow mine down.
Right.
Life is not fair for me, but it doesn't have to be not fair for somebody else along with me.
Exactly.
And if I do the proper planning, I am saying I love you. And you have to be careful because the caregivers are also saying that. Yeah. And they're saying, I love you, I will take care of you. And the person who's being cared for needs to say, I love you, and I'm going to take care of myself if I will just do the planning ahead. And I tell you, one of the stories that I tell folks that all the time, my brother-in-law was taking care of my mother-in-law. And as she got worse and worse, I was telling him about, look, we need to go ahead and move her into a facility. And he said, I'm not going to do it. I'm taking care of her. But I said, don't you understand that she has some dignity too? Mm-hmm. You're a man and you're her son. And you're taking care of things that are, quite frankly, a little uncomfortable to even talk about.
Right.
Okay. So, if I'm in a hospital and I had surgery, I can tell you, I don't want my family in the room when I got to go to the bathroom. I say get out. You
want a medical professional there attending to those things.
I have no problem with a nurse helping me to the bathroom. Okay, it's just not a problem.
Right.
But I do have a problem with my daughter helping me to the bathroom.
Yeah.
Okay. So and that's just in a hospital after a surgery. What would it be like if I'm that way day in, day out, every day?
For 12 years, which is not uncommon in the caregiving experience. And that's why so many caregivers truly lose their own health in the process.
They do. But with a little bit of set aside, a little bit of planning ahead, All of that, I promise, all of that can be avoided. I don't have time to be able to get all into it right now, but, I can do an illustration and show someone dollars and cents how you can set aside X amount of dollars. You are not, I got to repeat this, you're not spending the money yet. You're only spending money if the event takes place, but you're multiplying that money that you set aside maybe 4, 5, 8, 10 times because you set it aside.
Right.
If you never use it for long-term care, then you simply use it for whatever else you want to use it for, but you never lose it. And that's a very important distinction. It can be done. So there's no reason to avoid doing a pre-plan to avoid the cost of long-term care, whether it's in the home or whether it's assisted living or whether it's even in a nursing home. It can be taken care of.
Well, Kim, I want to guide my listeners to you so that they can contact you for this, because I know who listens to me. I know there are people who need this now for the people that they're even taking care of and for themselves, as we're talking about. I have a lot of boomers in my audience who haven't taken care of their own pre-planning. So, again, please tell us the best way to reach you so that they can get the help that you're talking about.
The easiest way to remember without having to run to a pen and a piece of paper is to look it up at don'tloseitall.com. And my phone number is right there. That's it. Don'tloseitall.com. It's right there, and they can take a look at that. I'm going to do some modifications on the website tonight, and all they have to do is call the phone number. I'm generally available. We're doing this interview late at night, and I can take phone calls. When people are distressed and when they need answers to questions, sometimes they need the answer right now.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just too much. They've just had enough. I remember, now this truly happened. I was in the kitchen of a fella. His wife was right around the corner. And I was in eyesight. I could see her and she could see me, and she was watching television. And he was sitting at the table, and he said, "You have to, I need you to refer me to an attorney to do a Medicaid plan." I said, "Would you mind telling me why?" Now, these were his words, okay? He said, "I'm either going to kill myself, I'm going to kill her, or I'm going to put her in a nursing home. I've had all I can take. It has driven me crazy." And
he must have been caring for someone with dementia. Alzheimer's, there you go.
Alzheimer's, yep. And he was just, she's yelling at him, he's yelling at her. He doesn't know how to handle it. He doesn't know how to deal with this. This woman is not the woman he married, he said.
Right.
He doesn't know who she is. She's somebody else. And he's to the point where he is not thinking rationally.
He was desperate.
And he's desperate, and he's not rational, and he says something like that. And I said, "Okay, let's calm down. Let's talk this through." And I was able to refer him to the proper channels, and he got help, and his wife got help, and she got the help that she needed, and he got the help that he needed, and he could go see her anytime he wants to, but without the stress of 24/7.
Because the stress of 24/7, particularly for someone with Alzheimer's, will just absolutely deplete you like it did that gentleman. So I'm thankful that you were able to help him. And that's such an important point. We're talking about caregivers here. And in our nation, there are some people in the aging industry, which everyone knows that I'm in, there are some people who are starting to refer to caregiving as the next public health crisis. Think about that. The next public health crisis. There are 44 million plus of us, like I said, and so many of us truly are neglecting our own health, going full shoulders in, 90 miles an hour all the time, putting the loved one before yourself, and then dealing with the stresses of caring for someone with Alzheimer's. On top of it, one person just can't do it all, and they can't do it all for any length of time. That's why it's so important to pre-plan and take some of the steps that you have mentioned here. You've got to preserve your life as well as their life. I tell caregivers all the time, my goal is for you not to just come out of this alive when your loved one leaves us, but alive and well, thriving, So
absolutely.
Everything that you're talking about
lady,
today. Go ahead.
One lady called me about, I guess, a month ago, and a church friend, and she said, I am beside myself. I don't know what to do. I'm traveling 120 miles to take care of my parents. My brother lives in the same town as they do, and he doesn't know how to do it and doesn't want to do it. My sister lives in New England, and she can't do it. And I'm the only one who can do it, and I have a family. Mm-hmm. And my family, I'm driving 2 hours one way, 2 and 3 and 4 times a week to take care of my family. And I'm burning money in gasoline. My work is being affected. My husband never sees me anymore. I mean, she went on and on and on, and I was just listening, Mm-hmm. And she said, "What can we do?" And I said, "Well, what you're describing is a crisis plan, but what you're also describing is a crisis plan for you." Right. And I said, "You are going to have to learn the word no, and you're going to have to learn the word you guys need to help."
Yeah.
So, we went into a lot of discussion about everything, and she finally was able to. It was a matter of she loved her parents, and her brother and sister was basically guilting her into having to do all the work.
Yep, I'm familiar with that scenario.
And she's losing her whole family over the thing.
Yes.
So
you can't do it.
Not only are the parents, and everything can be saved. There are solutions to these things, and
right.
all you have to do is look to the right people for the solutions, and there are solutions for everything. Better care. Better caring from people who are professionals who know how to do it. They take their 8 hours on, their the rest of the day off. They take 2 days off on the weekend. They get plenty of respite, and you get none.
Right.
And there's a huge difference in being able to care for somebody when you're a professional and you know what you're doing. They can do meds. It's just incredible the difference.
It is.
So people think they get worse care by doing a crisis plan, and they're not. What they're doing is they're getting better care.
And that's what they have to remember. They're really getting the best care for their loved one, because a depleted, worn out, exhausted, stressed out caregiver isn't the best plan for that person. Period.
No. When you're sitting there with mom and she's got a sandwich sitting in front of her, and you're saying, "Mom, there's your sandwich," and she 5 minutes later says, "Where's my sandwich?"
Right.
And it's still sitting in front of her. And then you start getting upset about it, and you start yelling at her, "Mom, it's sitting right in front of you," and you pick up the sandwich and wave it at her. That's not exactly the way you're supposed to care for somebody.
No,
but you
know
what?
That is so common.
That is so common. And I was at a kitchen table watching that one evening, and I said, "Boy, something's got to happen here. This is not good." So,
this is not good, so let's avoid it.
You've got 1,000 stories. I've got 1,000 stories. They all pertain, and I guarantee your audience, really, most of them are sitting there going, "Oh my gosh, are you kidding me? Oh yeah, this is me. This is me. This is what's going on." But there are better solutions, and you really got to get your mind across to it and get your emotions out of the way,
right?
And always do the right thing, and the right thing is always the best thing.
The right thing is always the best thing, and it will be the best thing for the person that you love as well as for you. Mm-hmm. And you, the caregiver, are just as important, and your health and your care and your overall well-being is just as important as that of your loved one. If I haven't said it once, I've said it 100,000 times, but please hear me. Yeah. Please hear me. It's so important. We all do it because we love the person in our life, and that's what drives us. But you have to find a balance so that you can truly take care of yourself in the process. And sometimes that does mean placing your loved one so they get the best care they need, and you can get the care you need for yourself. So, Kim, this has been a great show. It's been a really important show. I really appreciate, again, you being my guest today and just so candidly talking about some of these difficult topics. So I'm going to ask you one more time before we close out to give that website for anybody who might have just tuned in a little late or something so that they can contact you. And I will promise you I'll be posting this all over social media so people can find you.
Great. Thank you. Okay. So it's Kim, K-I-M, if you want to email, Kim@don'tloseitall.com, or you can go to the website and just take a look and find the email address and the phone number at don'tloseitall.com. That's, I couldn't believe that web address was available 2 years ago when I found it, but it was perfect for what I do.
It is perfect for what you do.
We don't want the people who are currently ill to lose everything they have, but we don't want you, the caregiver, to lose everything you have either.
Exactly.
And the idea here is not to have anybody lose everything they have, either emotionally, relationally, or even money-wise. It's simply not necessary, and putting it off does not help.
No, it does not help.
Procrastination is the worst part of this whole process because all it does is prolong the inevitable.
Right.
The person who's sick is going to get sicker, and the caregivers are going to follow right behind. And instead of me doing one crisis plan, I may wind up doing two. And that's not good.
Happens. So caregivers, please listen to him. This is important information that you receive. Please reach out to him. Go to his website or email him at the address he gave you. Take care of yourself. And this is one way you can do that, by planning for yourself. Kim, thank you again for being my guest today. This has been a great show. You've been listening to Toula's Tips.
Toula.
Well, thank you. You've been listening to Toula's Tips for Caregivers. My website is toulasTipsForCaregivers.com. That's just TOULAS, tipsforcaregivers.com, toulasTipsForCaregivers.com. And you can also find me on Facebook and on Twitter and on LinkedIn and pretty much anything you can think of. So go out there, search us out. We'll be glad to help you. Caregivers, please take care of yourself. And as I wish everyone all the time, many, many blessings to you in this role.
Hi, this is Toula, and I'm here to talk to you about Baptist's new Age Well Institute. Are you caring for a loved one who's 65 or older? Are you a boomer like myself who's caring for a parent? And perhaps your parent has been experiencing some decline in their overall health. Let me highly recommend to you the Baptist Age Well Institute. They have the only real geriatrician here in Northeast Florida who is able to look at the whole person. Their comprehensive approach includes a nurse, a doctor, a social worker, a pharmacist, a dietitian. They have their own physical therapy there. They can work with folks with memory disorders. My goal is to help you, the caregiver, find an organization that can care for your loved one who's 65 or older. I take my own parents there, and I highly recommend the Age Well Institute at Baptist. Please give them a call at 904-202-4243. Again, that's 904-202-4243. You'll be so glad you did.
Have you read the new book, Love Stories and Timeless Tips yet? It's by our own Toula Wooten with Toula's Tips for Caregivers. Toula is a caregiver, too, as well as an expert on caregiving. You can get it in paperback or on Kindle at Amazon.com. The book is filled with touching stories of caregivers taking care of their loved ones. Each chapter has helpful ideas that we all can use. I love that Toula included a Toula's tip with each story. Her message to caregivers is clear. Take care of yourself so that you can take care of your loved one. This is a beautiful book for all caregivers to read, whether you're a part-time, full-time, or long-distance caregiver, or someone receiving care. You should get the book today. Just go to Amazon.com. Search for Love Stories and Timeless Tips by Toula Wooten.